What's up, family? It's so good to be with you. This is your boy, Pastor Ramon Jackson, aka Pastor Ray. And as always, it is a pleasure to be with you on this Thursday evening, July 30th, 2022. Listen, if you're with us, why don't you go ahead and take a moment and share this on your Facebook page if you're joining us from Facebook. If you're joining us from YouTube, go ahead and take a moment and text the link to your friends and family. Listen, we're going to have a dynamic conversation this evening. We've got some very, very, very special guests with us, and I'm so excited about tonight's conversation. You know that we have been, oh, hey, Minister Carr. I see what you said there. Listen, I got one more week, and I'm so glad you're with us, and all the other folks that have joined us. I'm just so glad to see you. Tonight is going to be good. I promise you. So listen, take a moment, call everybody, tell them, listen, you got to watch, text everybody. Tonight is going to be great. This is the finale of our theme, Jesus in the Streets. Jesus in the Streets. We've gone from Jesus being in jail, and now we've gone from ghetto Jesus, and tonight we're talking about Jesus raises hell. I wonder if there's anybody out there who just feels like sometimes you just got to raise hell. You got to let folks know what you really mean and how you mean it. There's nothing wrong with it, because trust me, Jesus flipped over tables at one point himself. And that's the kind of conversation we're going to have tonight. Listen, what is the well? I'm glad you asked. If it's your first time being with us, the well is a conscious awareness, creative arts, faith community. All right, we cannot do this alone. We do it together with everyone. All right, and so we like to make sure that you understand our motto, which is we encounter Jesus, we become more like Jesus. Well, we encounter the well, we become the well, we emerge and share the well. Synonymous with we encounter Jesus, become more like Jesus, emerge and share Jesus. We encounter love, become love, emerge and share love. We encounter joy, become joy, emerge and share joy. What the biggest point about that is we encounter and we do life together. All right. So, what's up, brother Sean Michael Wilson, who's on? Listen, and so tonight we're going to do the Jesus Raises Hell piece. But before we do that, y'all know we have a featured artist of the month every month now. So, shout out to brother Dominic, who Nerd the Poet, who is our new creative arts director. And a shout out to our former director of arts, Miss Kim, who's still a part of our squad. We love both of you all. And we've been bringing you some poetry from Big Homey. That's right, Jeffrey Big Homey Banks. And so he's back on with us tonight. Y'all know Jeffrey is a Howard U alumni. He is a poet. He is an author. He is a grant writer. He has a long list of a resume, and you can find that on our social media. But we've invited him back one more night to bless our platform. So can we bring Big Homie in so that he could bless us with his dope lyrics and dope poetry? What's
Greetings,
up, Big
everybody.
Homie?
Hey, how are you?
I'm good, brother. I'm good, man. Listen, you have blessed us over the last couple of weeks, and I just cannot thank you enough for being our featured artist of the month. And we, of course, have we shared, we tagged you. We'll be sharing again next week a little bit more about you and another picture as well, just to like highlight you on our stuff. So, of course, again, we just are so grateful for you. We hope you've enjoyed your time with us. But I'm not going to take a long time. I want to get out the way, and I want the people to hear what you have. So, could you bless us at least one more time tonight?
Sure. Thank you, Pastor Ramon, for the invitation. Um, as we are today is pretty much the halfway point of the year, halfway point of 2022. We're talking about Jesus raising hell. Sometimes we feel the hell in our own life. So the A and B selection, which going to present now, I was trying to think about what I was going to present. You want to be able to hear God. You want to be able to move in all situations. His first piece that I'm going to do is called Intimacy. For those of you who follow, these are pieces which you might have heard before, but still for those who are new to me, to hearing me. Intimacy is just really when you're frustrated and you can't hear God, taking time to hear that still small voice. Intimacy. I have you by yourself today so you can learn a new way of intimacy. This Intimacy is not perverted, but as you become introverted, you'll get in touch with yourself. No one can truly understand the man and woman I created you to be. your adversity and trials so you can put a smile on a face in despair when you know that they care and they're not there to take advantage of them. They will experience my grace and know that they have a place in my army. I am the commander in chief, and some have the wrong belief about the weapons of mass destruction. These weapons were words that touched them meant to do them harm, but I'm here to tell you that none of these arms will prosper. The way you fight the enemy is with an intimate relationship with me, and that's why you're by yourself today. I know it's cliche to say that you're never alone, but without me, you could have never known how to be kept in the midst of the storm. I talk to your spirit and I whisper in your ear. As we spend quality time, I make it very clear the plans I have for you. When I speak my will, you want to doubt, but when it doesn't go to your plan, you want to pout. But my intimacy shows you my unfailing love. In your flesh, you fail again and again, but you need to know that I'm the only friend who sticks closer than a brother. You will discover that the lover of your soul will renew your spirit and make you whole, and that is true intimacy. I know that you're scared to love and you don't want to hurt, but as long as you know that your total worth lies in me, the intimacy will lead you to all truth. You don't have to be asleep. You have a clue. I am keeping you. The guilt from your past, please have no shame, but when you see your sin on others, please don't blame. I came so that you might have life. Although you are delivered, you may feel the thorn. My child, you have no reason to mourn. Jesus was born so that you might have life. So when those you meet are pushed and shoved, you can introduce them to my unfailing love because my love is more than life. And the main reason that you'll be razor sharp is because you have me in your heart. So take this time of intimacy. Learn to accept my love from your friends around. You need to know that my grace abounds so you can learn to love me better. No, I don't want you to be used, but I can instruct you in what to say and do. So take this time of intimacy. I really want to give you all of your heart's desires, but I first need to be your all-consuming fire. So take this time of intimacy. So as you're by yourself today, know that you're set apart. Talk to me and pray. I love you, value, and intimacy. Now, the second poem, which I'm going to present to you, is called Drunk. So, like I said, Jesus raises hell. A lot of times we may know the own hell in our life. But instead of just really trying to seek him, if you can think about the woman of issue of blood and she's desiring to be made whole. And just some of those things that are controversial, which I mean, I love the well for covering those tough issues. Sometimes we just go through life struggling and not trying to confront the issues, or like I talked about in the last poem, when you're trying to hear that still small voice and you feel that thorn, but you're still trying to serve God. So I'm using the metaphor of drunk, but still, as you're crying out, and still you gotta be able to push forward, and you have a call. So, drunk, drunk, inebriated, intoxicated with the need to be wanted. I'm haunted by the past of the last 20 years. The fear of rejection, so I seek the affection of strangers who bring danger to my soul. Drunk, not with alcohol, but I lack the wherewithal to make good decisions. I use such precision to do the exact opposite of what is right. So I take flight because I need a high from this low. No one really shows any true love. I discovered decoys that bring false joy that stems from being touched as a boy. Drunk. I can't deal with my hurt, so I flirt with someone just as dysfunctional as me. For one moment, I believe that 1 second of ecstasy will relieve the pain that has stayed in my brain for the last 20 years. The tears I shed from my head led me to a bed of someone I don't know. I behave like a host so I can go away from the sober reality. Drunk. I may do anything that may bring temporary satisfaction. My actions don't line up with the Holy Spirit, and I say I fear and I want to obey God, but my drunken state wants to please the body. It's amazing that me, one who believes in the tree of life, can be so try to spoil its fruit. Drunk. I'm a 300-pound track star running from the scars of the last 20 years. People cheer because they think I got it together, but I drink to escape from the stormy weather. I avoid being sober because I haven't gotten over the locusts in my garden, so my heart has hardened. I really want to love, but the stuff of the bloody glove has me thinking of criminal behavior when deep down I want to please my Lord and Savior. Jesus, I'm drunk. I loathe my sinful thoughts and I drove myself crazy because I felt I ought to be dead. In my head, I felt like I'm so dumb because I was numb from the pain. My life's been so mundane. I'm praying. God, you go through so many lengths to be that cold shower to sober me up from the devourer. Before I give in to a drinking desire, I have to remember that the devil is a liar. When you're drunk, the smoke screens can seem real, but with Christ, I have a love that no man can steal. Lord, please be my living water so I never thirst. Please give me your joy so I can put you first.
Wow,
Nice to meet
wow,
you. Okay.
wow, wow, wow. Can we get like just a bunch of snaps, man? I tell you, you know what I love about you, big homie, is just how clear you enunciate, man. I know that there are a couple people who were watching last week, and you know, in a time and a day where so many times people don't take the time to make sure that people understand what they're saying. You are always just super clear, and it is super good to have that. So thank you again for sharing. You know, because art is a part of a person, and so thank you for being vulnerable enough to share all of that with us. We just appreciate you so much. Yeah. Listen, we have a dynamic panel with us this evening. And Big Homie, feel free to stay on with us. Now, as we move into our conversation, Jesus raises hell. Brother Matt, how you doing, brother? Squad member Matt is on. Greet the people, brother.
I'm doing well, thanks. Good to see everyone. Yeah, I'm super excited for tonight. I think this is gonna be fun. Get to
Awesome,
meet the real
awesome.
Jesus tonight.
Give me the Jesus tonight. That's right. So you guys are familiar with our squad members, team members, Matt Collins, and then we have two amazing panelists on with us. To my, let's see, I always have to point to see what finger. Okay, so to my left bottom, to the bottom of me, to the left, is Pastor Peter Simmonside, who is out of New York, but he is with us closer, a little closer to us. Pastor Peter, why don't you just share with us who you are, what you do, and you know any other fun fact that you might want to share.
Greetings, everyone. I'm excited to be here. Again, I'm Pastor Peter. I'm a co-lead pastor along with my spouse and of the Community Church of New York City. We just launched this past weekend, and we also run a nonprofit called the Bridge Reentry Program, which is a nonprofit that's geared towards returning citizens. I'm glad to be here, and I'm excited to be a part of this conversation.
Yo, so amazing. The work you're doing, I already know it is amazing, and I'm so glad to have you here. I just also want to say hi to all the folks on Instagram. I know I went live on my page on Instagram, so hi to all those folks. And then to my top, to the top, and to the right of me is this amazing woman that I've had the chance to work with on several occasions. That is the Chief of Staff and Assistant State's Attorney, Madam Judith Danso. So, Madam Judy, how are you? Just share a little bit about who you are. What I know I said what you do, but you can share it again, and a little bit anything else you want to share.
Absolutely. Good evening, everyone. So excited to be here this evening, and certainly with you, Pastor Ray. It's always a pleasure. I am Judy Danso, as you mentioned, Chief of Staff in the Office of the State's Attorney for Prince George's County, Maryland. I'm also an Assistant State's Attorney, and I'm excited to join in the discussion this evening with the amazing partners and panelists for this evening's conversation. So thank you so much for having me.
Yes, we are so honored to have you. And then I want to give a shout out to Pastor Harrison, who is on with us virtually tonight. Brother Pastor Harrison, I know you're watching, and you might see him commenting, is the well. You know, I know people oftentimes are probably like, who's commenting is the well? It's not always Pastor Harrison, but tonight it is Pastor Harrison. So as you can see, he said, don't forget to like, comment, and share. We want to hear from you. Interact with us. So yeah, again, our platform welcomes you to interact with us. If you want to be a part of tonight's conversation, please don't hesitate. We've gone from ghetto Jesus to Jesus in jail, and we've talked so much. We've had folks on that have blown my mind with the stories they've talked about, from being in jail and incarcerated. Our first guest who was on talked about being incarcerated from the age of 16 and is now 65 and had been in prison most of his life, escaping death right at different times. And yet, some kind of way, Samuel and God made a connection. We talked last week with Brother Charles and Daniel. Daniel, who was a former mentee of mine, and who had come from making all the wrong choices in life, from doing drugs to being out there very promiscuous with women, and now to being married, having a first house, and just settling down and just being a constructive, abiding citizen. And then also Brother Charles, who had gone to prison for murder for 20 years and now is out, has a wife, has children, and knows God, and even goes around and preaches to jails and to churches, and just shares his story as a testimony of that God can change you. Now, this week we're talking about Jesus Raises Hell. And we've got two folks on who are out there doing the work, because we want to talk about the fact that it's not just about God meeting people, but it's about us meeting people where they are. And so tonight, I guess I want to start off with this first question. Madam Judy, people hear all the time this thing about state's attorney and the state's attorney's office. And I think for so many of us, the first thing we think is, oh, you out there locking people up. You out there, you out there taking people to jail, putting people in prison. Could you shed a little bit of light of what you really do? What does it mean to be a state's attorney?
Sure, sure. So you're right. And oftentimes people, tend to associate prosecutors with the police, right? We are the arm that is responsible for holding offenders accountable. Certainly, the safety of our community, the residents that we serve, is our primary responsibility. However, there also has to be an opportunity to really understand what justice looks like. And justice doesn't always mean pursuing prosecution as, the ultimate resolution or disposition in any case. I think that as conscious prosecutors, when we think about what justice really is and how we achieve that, it certainly is a case by case scenario. It really is an evaluation of the type of offender that we have before us. It's not just a blue file that comes across our desk for us to just automatically think that prosecution is the answer. There are different types of facts and circumstances and scenarios that present where, again, prosecution is not necessarily viable. So really having an understanding around what the pursuit of justice really is and what it should look like really, again, requires a balancing of the issues, a balancing of the factors, really doing, I think, a holistic and a deep dive review of what the facts and the circumstances are that present before you. What type of offender do we have? What may be, some underlying issues that may have precipitated, this type of behavior that ultimately became a criminal case that now is up for prosecution, quote unquote. Is diversion an option? What type of services may this
Oh no.
that we have to look at as prosecutors? Defense attorney prior to becoming an assistant state's attorney and joining the office. And so, my passion had always been advocacy, had always been, defending and representing those who were underrepresented or did not necessarily have a voice or an opportunity to understand how to navigate the criminal justice system. And so, really pursuing justice at the forefront was always a passion for me. Um, I was able to now sort of, evolve and flip the script a little bit as a prosecutor because of my background. And that ultimately has allowed me to have a different perspective in how we all, as an office and as an administration, particularly under Ms. Braveboy's leadership, and how we pursue justice. And so, as a prosecutor, there are certainly a number of challenges that present. But I think the beauty of being a prosecutor is the level of discretion that we have in being able to understand the best outcomes, the best practices that we have to put in place to implement in pursuing that fight for justice for everyone that's involved in the criminal justice system, and that
Yeah.
includes our victims.
You know, and it's so good to hear that from you. I know that a lot of times people probably don't understand the pressure that comes with being in the
Yeah.
state's attorney's office. I mean, you know, you have this oath to uphold the law, and
Yep.
I believe that we want you to like uphold the law. I would not want someone to do harm to my family and not know that the person who was prosecuting that person was not going to try to do their best to make sure justice is served. But I
Mhm.
also like the fact that you spoke about your heart and your password because I do want to know, make sure that I want to know that the people who are serving us in terms of holding people accountable and for justice also are considering the story and the stories of the people who are doing the things that they're doing, and that there's also some grace in how you serve. And so I really
Sure.
appreciate you sharing. It's so important. Pastor Peter, much alike, you're out there doing the footwork, you're out there doing some of the groundwork. Could you talk a little bit about, you're a pastor, um, but some people don't think that pastoring is anything to do with justice, right? Okay, you preach and you got people, you can make people holler and you can do all those great things in church. But then you said something about being out into the streets and being in the community. Talk a little bit about how being a pastor in your perspective correlates to justice.
Well, I mean, the Jesus that I know was a freedom fighter. So following that Jesus puts me into the streets. I believe that God called us to the people. Where are the people? In the streets. You know, when you look at the life of Jesus and you study and find out that the Jesus that was introduced to most of us, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed, meek and lowly, humble and holy Jesus, was really not the Jesus that lived. The Jesus that lived resisted against empire. The Jesus that lived fought for the marginalized. The Jesus that lived walked on the edges, and and it was out there. You know, when you read the scripture, the few times Jesus was in the temple, he was disrupting things. But when he was actually preaching, he was out in the public square. He was out where the people were. So that's the Jesus that I know. And so that's the Jesus that I try my best to mimic. Yeah, we have gatherings, my Christian background, we gather to pray, we do communion and all that, but that's not the center part of our ministry. The center part of our ministry is being out there where the people are. Before I introduce this God to people, I have to meet the need, feed them. Some people have issues with mental health. Some people have issues with housing. How can I introduce a God that supply all our needs if I'm not the hand of God to help uh, push uh, push people or give people resources they need to survive? And that's what it's about, survival. So
Yeah,
that's the Jesus I was introduced to. So that's the Jesus I try to mimic.
absolutely, absolutely. Listen, if you're just joining us tonight, I see some people have just gotten on, like Helen Ellis and a few other folks. Listen, we're talking with, and Judy, I want you to know, Madam Judy, that you got people out there making sure that I stand corrected. We're on with the Chief of Staff and Assistant State's Attorney, Madam Judith Danso, who,
Judy
who,
is
who is
just
def-
fine.
who has given me permission to call her Judy. So I just want to make sure I let everyone know that she's given me that permission. and Pastor Peter, who is on with us, who lives and resides in New York City, and has a church and does a lot of the community work. Matt Collins, who is our social justice person here at the Well, part of our squad, and Big Homey, who is our featured artist, who also does justice work and is out in the streets as well. So listen, the question is now, Judy, I really want to hit you with this question because you've talked about your work. And Matt, feel free to jump in here too, man. I'm not gonna take all the questions, brother. I promise. Judy, how do you see your spirituality in your work? Like, is there some sort of, do you see your religious background coming forward in how you move in the state's attorney's
It
office?
has to. Absolutely. It has to. Um, as you mentioned, the work that we do is very challenging, and there are a lot of different types of pressures that come with the nature of the work. And that is because of the obligations that we have, not only to the residents and the citizens, but as I mentioned, our obligations to our victims, right? And so, there has to be a centering, there has to be a level of faith that allows you to have the ability to really balance those interests, those challenges, because they will come and they come daily. Oftentimes, you are faced with, well, what does this defendant really need? Underneath it all, we understand what we have before us in a black and white document that speaks to the statement of charges and the alleged offense. But then, as Pastor mentioned, are there underlying mental health concerns? Is there a drug or alcohol addiction problem? Are there other issues that, were untreated as a juvenile? Um, you, so many different things that unfortunately we as a people and just in humanity, that we face from adolescent through adulthood that may not have necessarily been addressed and or managed. And so having to, understand that and balance that against, um, unfortunately, the conduct of someone who, you know, uh, uh, who engaged in some level of criminal conduct and offended someone who may be a victim is a hard thing to do. So really having to, balance the interest there and kind of understand what is the most appropriate outcome for all of the parties involved is something that I believe that, you have to rely on your faith for. You have to be strong in making those decisions, and they're tough decisions, because oftentimes you're not going to make everyone happy. Everyone's not going to necessarily be pleased with what the decision is that you ultimately arrive at. But I know that for me, I have to be I have to be covered in the understanding that I have in the God that I serve. Because one thing that I know about the God that we all serve is that He puts people into certain spaces and positions for good reason. Whether it is to be a counselor through a situation, whether it is to provide some perspective around, what the potential outcomes can be, how this outcome could ultimately be favorable to you as a victim, even. Those are the hard conversations that you have to have. But I tell you, one thing that I do is I pray daily. I have to. Because it's through prayer and through faith that allows me to be led into those decisions. And even sometimes when I don't know if it's the right decision, but through my prayer, through my belief, I come to a level of discernment and understanding that allows me to be at peace with what that decision is. And I know that, Madam State's Attorney is also someone who leads by faith. But it is tough. It is very challenging. But again, if you are a woman or a man of faith and you are led by that level of spirituality, it certainly gets you through. And that's one thing that I definitely rely on in the day-to-day decisions that we make, because oftentimes we choose paths that are unconventional, and they're not always applauded. They're sometimes questioned, but we have to understand that we choose them for good reason, and we choose them because we believe that it will serve the best interest of everyone that's involved. It's not a personal decision that we make. It certainly is a spiritual one oftentimes, but it is certainly something that is relied on, and it's something that I definitely pray about daily in my walk, professionally and personally.
Yeah. I know you have to pray so often. I mean, Kim Carr says, thank you, Pastor Kim Carr. She said, thank you, Madam Judy, for your service. I love what Pastor Harrison says. We know what, speaking about the folks who have gotten in trouble, he says, we know what they did. The question is, what do they need? And I
That's
know
right.
that,
That's right.
yeah, yeah.
That's
And I,
right. And it's hard, Pastor Ray. It's really hard because, like I said, when you're dealing with victims who and next of kin who have lost individuals, sometimes it's not even an option for them. It's not about any sort of grace. But then again, like I said, when you are placed in a position to really have those conversations, provide some level of perspective, sometimes God just will speak through you in those conversations. Honestly, I have had them. They are tough to have. But one thing that I know is that when, somebody on the other end of a conversation that, I may not necessarily know what the outcome is going to be or how they will receive it, I think the beauty of it and the blessing of it is the fact that they were able to receive it. You understand? Because initially it's like they don't want to hear it. But at some point along the way, there's a break in the conversation that allows God to speak through you clearly so that they can receive that word.
I and I'm going a little off my questions here, but Judy, you just made me think. Can you just take me through? Does it ever break your heart? Does it ever break your heart the work that you're doing? And Pastor Peter, I'm coming to you, but I
Good
think that's
question.
important to share. Does it ever break your heart? You are on the end of somebody possibly not seeing, right, freedom for the rest of their life sometimes.
Yeah.
And there are times, right? And so, can you just talk about, like, does it ever I mean, you have a hard decision. You are the person who stands between a person's freedom and their family, right?
Yeah.
Let me be fair. Their choice, right, has put them in this place, but you're the
Yes.
person who has to put the exclamation point on what then now. Talk to me a little bit about where your heart stands in those situations.
Again, I mean, tough. It's tough. It's like a rock and a hard place sometimes. You're stuck in a tough position. But it is, you know, where your heart sort of leads you in believing is the right decision and the right path, right? And so I think through a sort of reflection on the total picture, all of the facts and circumstances surrounding that particular case, and ultimately, as someone commented, what that individual may need, even against the backdrop of what they have done, you have to understand that this may be somebody that really does need some mental health counseling or services that will essentially, provide them with a path of rehabilitation, right? And so it it's something that you have to carefully consider. And so when we talk about raising hell and really fighting for for that type of justice for that individual, it's a fight that you have to, pursue. It may not be something that, again, is a popular decision or that people are necessarily agreeable to. But if your heart leads you in that direction because you believe that that is right, and that is what, your faith has taught you to believe and understand is the appropriate path, then that's something that I will continue to fight for day in and day out, even if it's not something that everyone else may agree with.
Yeah, yeah. Matt, I'm gonna come to you in just a second. So get ready. Pastor Peter. So then on the opposite side, right? You talked about this reentry stuff. So you're working with folks. So Madam Judy has made her decision. She has decided, right, that these folks have to do some time. They've got to pay ultimately for, or be held accountable rather, for what they've done. And then you're on the opposite side, right? Like you're there when these folks are coming out. Talk to me a little bit about how you see Jesus in those moments, right? Like what does that look like? Because that's something we don't see enough of reentry programs, right? There's a part of that folks don't even understand. What does that look like from you? What even made you want to deal with folks who have been locked up and incarcerated? Like, how do you even get to that place where you go, I need to work with them?
Well, my spouse have experience. He's a returning citizen. Okay, when our second year of semin, our no, I'm sorry, our first year of seminary, when we were getting our MDivs, we got them together at Virginia Union University, and we had to uh, work at a nonprofit. But my spouse couldn't find a nonprofit that would fit for him and fit his passion, so he started one, which was and that's Bridge Reentry Program. And so, of course, we finished our MDiv program, but we still had the nonprofit, and we kept that going. And so that's how you know that's how we just came into this work. And then both of us have family members. My oldest son is returning citizen. He's back and forth. He has issues that he deals with, but when he comes out, we're here for him to give him uh, a leeway to success, a path to success. So that and how I see Jesus in that is the returning citizens are marginalized. They can't find jobs because of that one check they put on their application. They won't be hired. It depends on what they were arrested for, or they were incarcerated for, whether or not they can get funding for school. Some of them can't get housing because of the ridiculous fees that they have to pay once they get out. And they can't get jobs to pay these fees, so they go back to hustling, and then they get caught, and then they go back to jail. So it seems like the system is rigged to send them back for that free labor, which we call slavery. So it's just all those issues that we deal with. And so when we talk about fighting against social ills, that's one of the big social ills that we're fighting against. It's that unfair incarceration. And I'm not now. I understand people need to. You break the law, there's punishment. We understand that. But then sometimes it seemed like the system was rigged against us. That when you talk about Reconstruction, and when the prison system started really flourishing in America, and how the free labor, especially private prisons, and how you get all these people in these situations where it's just another situation of slavery, and then so that's how I see Jesus. We fighting against the social ill, which is unfair incarceration.
Yeah. And
Hope
there's
I
a
answer your
question I appreciate it. I appreciate it. There's a question I'm gonna get to in a few seconds. Madam Judy, I'm gonna come back to you. A big homie, we might have some feedback from you. I think just in case, could you make sure you mute? And just in case you're joining us again, we have the Chief of Staff and Assistant State's Attorney here in PG County, Madam Judith Danso. We have Pastor Peter Simmonside, who is out of New York, who is in charge of doing community work, leads a church, pastoring a church there, and just doing amazing stuff. We have our social justice person, Matt, on with us, and we have our featured artist, Big Homie. So please take a moment, share this on your pages, send it to your network, let folk know this is something they should tune into. Matt, you do this social justice work with us so much, and you are always standing in front on the front lines. Are you hearing things that resonate with what you teach? I know for a while you were over American University teaching this to folks. I mean, are there things that are resonating in this conversation for you?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I really appreciate what Pastor Pete was just sharing at the end there about like this is, when we talk about mass incarceration and the criminal legal system, I think it's almost we're talking when we talk about sort of this idea of accountability for criminal behavior, we're talking about this ideal that particularly for communities of color, like is not a reflection of reality, right? Like our criminal legal system has sort of become this almost a sort of a frankly the safety net for folks who have been failed by every other system, and so you end up in these positions where there's folks that have been failed by education, folks that can't get jobs, folks that have have lived in communities that have been just systemically disinvested in forever, and we get surprised when there's violence and there's crime. So I mean that's kind of why I started getting into this work. Honestly, was like I am unsure whether there is anyone who is truly bad and needs to be locked up. I think that's a discussion for another day. Um, but certainly, like a lot of the folks that are coming through this system, like we failed them at so many points in the process that then we turn around and say, you know, to use your phrase, like your choice got you here. Like I think there is a choice, but I think the question that sometimes we don't necessarily see the answer to is how much choice do people have? If the standard to get out of the neighborhood is an A+ and everyone's getting a B, then what that means is they're ending up in tough situations. So I think this conversation is sort of why I got into this, right? Like I come from, as you may be able to tell, I come from another country. We don't lock up as many people in Britain, and frankly, like for the most part, we're safer. This mass incarceration experiment, whatever underpins it, is not working. And so I think we've got to start thinking about how do we make space for folks to come home? How do we make space for community investment? How do we, work within communities to see what solutions they want? A lot of the time the system is leveraged by folks who look like me, who don't live in the communities that are struggling, and then we sort of impose our colonial will on these communities, and that's not the solution. Like there's got to be a more intelligent way to do this, and part of the work that I do is empowering folks that have been incarcerated to like raise their voices and say this is actually what we want. We just did a session in Chicago on like what do folks who've been incarcerated and victims and perpetrators of gun violence want to do about gun violence. They're the experts. I can read as much research as I want on how to do it, but like the folks that are doing it and the folks that are suffering from it are the ones that really understand the issues, and a lot of what they want isn't what we're offering them, or isn't just what we're offering them, let's say. Like I think there's a need for accountability, but for a lot of folks in those communities, there's like it's my best friend and my brother shooting at each other. Like I don't want one of them to die and one of them to go to prison, but we got to do better than this. Sorry, did that answer your question? That was a long answer.
Yeah. No. Listen, it's great because Matt, I think you are. That's why I love you and Anna Josie for spearheading our social justice department. I think, right? Like I think it's important, and people could write me and say whatever they want. I don't care, because I think you and Anna Josie do such a great job, and I think it's important. I love the fact that you stepped up, because oftentimes I think it is Black people at the helm of something, right, fighting for our rights, but you don't get the camaraderie of, and though you're not from, right, like originally from our country, you still don't see a white male, right, spearheading a lot of this type of work. And I think it's important to see that. I think it's important to note, right? And so I'm just so grateful that you are with us and that you are on the front lines with us. And I think it's important to note that. Madam, Reverend Dent says STVU, woohoo! I think she was shouting out to you, Pastor Peter. She also has a question, and I want to then go to. So we're talking about raising hell, right? We're talking about Jesus raising hell. And we're talking about us. Sometimes we have to raise hell to get justice. So Madam Judy, there's a question from Reverend Mama Dent. We call her Mama here because she's just a part of our squad as well. She says,
"Hey, Mama."
I love it. And so the question, sort of to Matt's point, she says, how are you managing the extremes of what appears to be too much leniency, especially with youth, versus the harshness against African American males?
That's a really good question. Because one of the, I like to say, quote unquote, narratives around our youth is that they're monsters, right? Especially the ones that we find to be perpetrators in our community. And we stand hard and fast against that, because we cannot give up hope on our young people. we truly have to get to the root of the issue. We've been saying that for years, right? And again, a number of different types of life experiences that unfortunately affect our young people who, up until a certain age, 26 is what they say, haven't even fully, developed mentally, right? And so I think that there are still some concerns or questions that we have to ask ourselves in terms of their ability to make the right decision. I know that Matt kind of spoke about, well, to what extent are the options? They are limited.
I think we lost her, right? I think and I think she's on her phone, and I think it might be
I
her.
think I'm
Yeah, we
back.
lost you for. Yeah, we lost you for a quick
And I
second.
do think that they are limited in nature depending on the types of communities that individuals
Yeah.
come from, because there's always this sense of, hope or lack thereof. There's a strong, strong component of hopelessness when it comes to communities of color, and particularly when it comes to our young people who haven't been exposed to different types of opportunities. And so, when the question is asked, how do we sort of balance the extremes of that type of leniency, and how we defer to different types of options for juveniles, versus holding them accountable or pursuing prosecution or jail time for them? Again, it's one of those things where we have to consider what the options are and what truly are in the best interest of our young people. I think that oftentimes, if we are able to really provide some of those foundational opportunities, oftentimes, jobs, again, addressing some of the mental health concerns, um, providing them with opportunities to build skills, and trade opportunities, things like that, that they've never really been exposed to. I think that sort of flies in the face of saying that, we're sort of too lenient with our youth. If we haven't even given them the opportunity to explore those options, to see if they can be successful tools that they can utilize, as they are continuing their maturation process, their growth, excelling and ultimately navigating through whatever it is they would like to pursue career wise, or, in school. We can't necessarily say that it's broken. We can't necessarily say that, these are individuals that aren't ripe for greater success beyond their current circumstances. So I think that we have to really consider all of our options that are available to us. And that's why working really closely with a lot of our community partners on the ground that are willing to provide those second chance opportunities, that are willing to be mentors, to serve as, guidance counselors for our young people, are so critical and important, because they do deserve that second chance. They do deserve, in some instances, an opportunity to be made whole, an opportunity to, come out of the justice system, if you will. But we can't necessarily address all of the facts and circumstances until we've at least given them those options and those opportunities. So I really am a strong.
I know. I think it's crazy because she's on her phone. I think, and so I think when people call her, she blacks out for a quick second until she's able to end the call. Um, but um, just to follow her up, so and Big Homie, I'm gonna bring you in here too. Um, Big Homie and Pastor Peter, I'm gonna look at both of you. Um, Judy, you back with us, Madam Judy?
Yes, I apologize. My phone went out. I'm here, but go on, Pastor Ray. I'm here.
Okay, okay. No, I love what you were saying, and to your point, I wanted to then go to Big Homie and Pastor Peter here on this question. So we see this moment. We see these moments in the Bible where Jesus is upset, right? And to now we're going to get into that topic. Jesus raising hell. And of course, if you're just joining us, again, we're with Pastor Peter Simmons out of New York, pastor and community activist, Matt Collins, who's a part of our squad, social justice person. Chief of Staff and Assistant State's Attorney for PG County, Madam Judith Danso, and then our featured artist for the month and activist and writer and author, Big Homey. My question is, so we've seen these places where Jesus ultimately goes off. He's not right this typical calm person. We see him on his way right down the path, and he stops at the synagogue and he goes in. And he's like, y'all are messing up, and he starts to flip over tables and whatnot, right? So oftentimes Jesus is challenging the local authority. He is challenging the systems of oppression. Do you think, Pastor and Big Homie, that we as Christians are too reluctant to follow that example? Because listen, we got a lot of people be like, listen, Jesus is peaceful, Jesus is calm. Why can't we just handle things in a very peaceful tone? Why can't we just be out there and just talk through it? Do you think that's the approach we always should take, or do you think people are reluctant? So why are people reluctant to do that?
Ecclesiastes
You want me
always talk about there being a pastor. Do you want to say something?
to?
No, go ahead, Big Homie.
Was that? So I mean, I was saying Ecclesia. I mean that there's a time for everything. So I mean, I'm just saying there is the God of war. So I mean, I'm just saying for a thing of like really raising up, or even if you think about, our forefathers, our parents, our grandparents, like starts just with the activism in the '60s, and just really making change. Like a lot of times people are docile or just really feeling like that yes, there is peace, but still, like as far as making that change, shaking up stuff, or just like I think what was so eloquently said earlier in this discussion, people think it's all about stained glass and communion and all the things that we've learned, like growing up in church, and not really making change in the community. I mean, I'll leave certain ministries which I worked with in the past nameless, but just like, we were doing homeless outreach, and when they finally came to the service, folks were like way distant, like they don't want to touch or interact. I'm like, wasn't this what we were looking for? So, I mean, so it's just that really taking that time to make that positive change. I mean, restorative justice or working with, I mean, I work with education, I work with summer camp, whatever the case is. So, like, just taking that time, people are just feeling like, just all about the hoop and how you, can make people shout and like all the semantics of like what a church service is without really being about the ministry. So I mean, you really got to think about everything that encompasses what Christ came to do to fulfill the law. So it's just like really be mindful. And I think that a lot of people are very hesitant, whereas a lot of activists, if they are going to make disruption, that a lot of these freedom fighters will have bail for like, if they're going to be making peaceful. I mean, if you think about research, like, what Martin Luther King did, my fraternity brother John Lewis did. It's just like, there's a lot of things that when you are making that peaceful change that like, we're all working together. But, unfortunately, a lot of people who are in positions are really about self and not really building and disrupting.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Pastor Peter, do you agree? Do you want to extend a little bit more on that? Just
Yeah,
are people too reluctant? Mm-hmm.
yeah. I think that people are where they're taught to be. I blame colonized theology. That's what I blame. I blame the theologies that keep us being good Negroes. You know, like that's what I blame. I blame. We look at scriptures like turn the other cheek. We look at scriptures that uh, we forget. And I think that black people and marginalized people are the most forgivingest people in the world. We forgive any and everything. We've been taught that we're just gonna leave it in the Lord's hands because God is gonna take care of it by and by in the sky, and that's what the oppressor wants. You know, I'm not judging that, because our forefathers talked about, I got shoes, you got shoes, all of God's children got shoes, because they didn't have shoes, and they believed that when they get to heaven they was going to get shoes because of poverty and how they were treated. But now, since we are educated, and we had prophets to come through like Malcolm X, and prophets to come through, like the prophetess Angela Davis now, all these that's coming through, that's teaching us that we can change, we can make a change. We can decolonize our minds, and like I said earlier, find out about the freedom fighter Jesus, and find out what the word Christ really means. It's not Jesus' last name. Christ just means anointed one, who's anointed for the times, who's prophetically anointed to push us from point A to point B. And so that's what I blame, those type of theologies that want to keep us in our place, and don't cause trouble. When you look at the 60s and the civil rights movement, and you look at the church, and I know we see Dr. Martin Luther King, and we see churches, black churches, but that was a small percentage of the black churches that was in this country. We see them because they were televised, but they don't show all the black churches that say, I don't want that in my neighborhood. We just gonna leave well enough alone. We just gonna just trust God and all that kind of stuff. They don't show that. They just show the small percentage, and that's how the movement was built. But to answer your question, I just blame dangerous theologies that keep us oppressed.
Mm.
Yeah. 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 Pastor Peter, I imagine that it has to be tough on you. I know I talked to Madam Judy earlier about her heart, but I mean, when it comes to the work that you're doing, I can only imagine that it has to be tough, because there's a part of you that I guess has to practice a lot of patience.
Yes.
But there's because I'm sure there's got to be a lot of outrage in you at times when you see injustice, and there's not but so much that you can do about it by yourself. I mean, can you talk a little bit about that passion that burns in you and your husband, that keep you? I mean, you stay in the work, right? And the work is not easy. And I know there's so many times that people want to, like, we talk about folks now who give up who get a new phone because their old phone, right, won't work, or who just go out and want everything microwave. That that you're not going to see the immediate huge change overnight, but you stay in the work, right? Speak to that a little bit. Why does that passion still burn, and what drives you? Because it gets tough. I'm sure you have sleepless nights. Why do you choose to stay in this?
Well, I'm going to use an example. This past weekend, we officially launched our ministry in New York. Okay, and it was during New York Gay Pride. So that Saturday we had a picnic at the pier, where, I mean, if you know anything about New York and the pier, that's where a lot of LGBTQ homeless kids hang out at. Okay. So we strategically went down to the pier, and we had, boxes and boxes of pizza that we were giving out to the community, and handing out just a whole bunch of stuff that we were just giving out. And there was this young brother that came. I saw him. He was just walking around, but he kept looking. And he was just walking around. I invited him over. And and after a while he got acclimated to us, and he stayed with us the entire time. Okay. And then he ended up taking like 2-3 boxes of pizzas with him. But then when I was packing up and leaving, I saw him one, and I realized that young man was homeless. He didn't have anywhere to go. My spouse and I, we were going to our apartment in Harlem. We good. But this young man didn't have, and my heart just broke. you know, and that just let me know. And my spouse, we talked and said, you know, this is good, but we got to do more. So we talked about, you know, purchasing transition homes for young LGBTQ homeless youth, you know, and that's what, you know, through that, that's how we get the ideas that we need to do more. We need to do more. Yes, we get tired. Yes, we get disgusted. Yes, some of the same people we try to help, you know, they don't want our help, you know, but they need our help, you know. Yes, but when we see situations like that young man, that just let us know that our work is relevant and is valuable. And we got to keep pushing and we got to keep doing what we got to do and ask in spirit for resources to do
Yeah.
the work that we're doing.
Yeah, Madam Judy, I'm about to come back to you in a second. But
Yeah.
Pastor, I wanna listen. You brought up something, and we here at the well, we talk about everything. This is what I love about this
Mhm.
platform, man. But you also bring up something we've talked and we've delved into. So we had this encounter, oh man, last year, Black History Month, I think it was, and we talked about which Black Lives Matter. And we were talking about, right, because the Black Lives Matter movement was, and we delved into, so when you say Black Lives Matter, are you talking about all Black lives? Specifically, are you talking
Yeah.
about queer Black lives? And so I want you to speak from this place of, right, you are Black, you're also a Black gay man. And so we
Mhm.
see the ostracization of the Black man and the Black being, the Black human, the African human. We already see the oppression that lives there. But then it's another
Mhm.
thing to be a Black gay man or a Black gay woman or
Right.
bisexual or any part
Right.
of the LGBTQ community. Do you, and I think we, and I think, and I'm never scared to say it, I think we as the church get this wrong on so many levels, because we as the church, as opposed to trying to love people, we tend, and I speak, of course, on the large scale, right? We see this in traditional church, especially. We're so quick to point out sin, what we call sin. We think it's sin. We blah blah, blah. And we could totally get into the theology of that. We do it several times here, but that's not my point here. What I'm really moving into is, can you talk a little bit about how you see the LGBTQ community hurting even more, right? When it comes
Mhm.
to um, trying to work through and just survive in everyday life, and what do you see there leading? How do you see that leading to um, depression and jail and prison, and what happens in that community that we're missing? What are we missing when it comes to justice in that community?
Well, if you know, if we do our research, we'll find that at the head of every major movement, Black movement in this country, there was a LGBTQIA person at the forefront. And I need to lift up my Black transgendered sisters who, you know, who led the fight. When we look at this pride, you know, if you look at it on the media, you see, you know, white men and you know going forth and you know and hugging each other, whatever, and they are the face of pride. But the movement was started by Black trans women. You don't hear that, but that's how the movement was started. You know, the movements that you see, like the Black Lives Matter movement, was started by queer Black youth. You know, helped to start by with queer Black youth. You know, so if you want to see where we are in the movement, you know, all you have to do is just do research and you'll see us there. But because of, I guess, heteronormative norms, we're kind of pushed back. You know, you don't hear Bayard Rustin like you should, and how he helped Dr. Martin Luther King, and how he helped how he arranged and organized the March on Washington because he was a Black gay man, but you don't hear of him, you know, and you don't hear of these other uh, Black queer people who were at the forefront of movements, you know. But I wanted to speak on something that you said briefly. You know, I am a Black body first, which is totally disrespected in this country. totally devalued. You know, you were talking about the young people earlier. I was labeled as a predator when I was a child, because I was a black boy. They treated me like a predator. When my mother and father, they moved us out of the urban area into the suburbs, I started going to a school where I was one of the only black kids. So soon as I walked in there, and this was in the early 70s, I'm aging myself. I had an afro then, and I had the dashikis, and I had the platform shoes because I come from that, that Black Power family. But then we went to this white school, so I went in there with my culture. Now, when I was in my black school, I fit in, but when I went to that white school, I was automatically labeled as a predator because I didn't fit into their norm. And they treated me that way. And they treated all the other black boys that they tried to put me into slow learning classes and all of that, And that's that prison pipeline thing, And I'm thankful that I had parents that didn't allow that to happen. But a lot of the young people that I grew up with in that environment end up going to jail and doing other stuff that that would lead them into destruction. So the black me being a black gay man, that's who I am. But when society see me, they just see me as a black man, which is a threat, especially an educated black man. That's more of a threat.
Yeah. I appreciate that, man. We just try to make sure we tackle all of that here. So
Mm-hmm.
we want to be outspoken about it. So thank you for sharing. And I'm so sorry that you went through that. And I pray for folks who feel similar. But I think it's always important to give a space for that voice because there are people
Yeah.
who struggle and they need to hear, right? Not only do we see the presence of the LGBTQ community in our civil rights justice work because those voices were muted, right? And we don't talk about that in
Mm-hmm.
our history books. We don't talk about that openly. Um, and so I want to make sure that people from everywhere know God has purpose, right? God always has purpose for your life.
Right.
There's always purpose and design. You're never created by mistake. And there are too many young people and too many people in general that feel that way. And I'm grateful for that voice that you have that will hopefully you know mhm. Yeah,
Can I say something? If
please
I
do.
was not rejected from the traditional church like I was, I would not be doing the work that I'm doing today. So all of
Mm,
that rejection and stuff that I've been through, we've been through, I believe it's divine. It was divinely ordered to push us into the work today. So I really don't complain. I'm thankful to Spirit that Spirit allowed me to go through all of that, and give me the resilience that I needed to do the work today. So
absolutely.
I believe it. I
Absolutely.
believe all of it was ordered.
Absolutely, absolutely. I'm grateful for that push too, brother, because you're doing the work, and that's going to turn me now to Madam Judy, who's got that amazing smile up there. Madam Judy, I want to know. So we've talked a lot about this system of oppression, and I think you've even talked about right, like being a person who is trying to fight for justice in all angles.
Hmm.
What my question to you is, what are you know let me be careful. I want to, and you let me know, right? If you how you feel about this question, and we'll talk about it. But I think we've all identified that the system, in its history, right, has been oppressive, and that we are still trying to work our way from where the system has been oppressive and
Sure.
still is to some extent, right? And so how do you maintain and this is a question actually that comes from Matt, so I'm grateful for you, Matt. But how do you maintain your integrity and your loyalty to true justice when oftentimes you're working in a system that is even oppressive to people like you?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I think it just comes down to being true to who you are, being true to oneself and what God has called you to be. That's what Pastor Pete was talking about in terms of being real freedom fighters today. We have to be able to evolve and take that foundation and that path of being trailblazers before us, standing on their shoulders to continue the work today. And sometimes it may be adverse to what the system is set up to be and what it is. But to me, that is the crux of what true justice is. And I can't call myself someone who is an advocate for my people, particularly those that we know are currently serving out, excessive sentences, are being, treated inhumanely, that unfortunately in many police departments historically are targets when it comes to policing in our communities. I can't call myself a true champion for justice and an advocate if I'm not fighting against some of those instances of discrimination that continues to perpetuate in our criminal justice system. Even as a prosecutor, I understand that yes, individuals must and shall be held accountable for sure. But that is why, when it comes to those that have been convicted, we have been very atypical in our approach when it comes to reviewing sentences, when it comes to looking at the integrity behind certain types of convictions, when it comes to understanding that for some of our young people and our emerging adult population, that there can be an opportunity for change for them even behind the wall in the justice system as they are serving out those, terms of prison. And so, yeah, being very innovative and understanding of how we approach what true justice looks like is something that has to remain at the core of who you are when it comes to, again, pursuing justice in the fashion that is built in truth, that's built in understanding, and ultimately, the types of freedoms that we deserve. Like I said, it's a tough balance, and I do understand that we have to be able to do that with a very conscious eye when it comes to the types of cases that we deal with. Sometimes we are dealing with individuals that have committed very heinous crimes. And like you said, finding a way to understand, what the matters of the heart are, but at the same time, what the concerns and what ultimately victims and families and those that have lost family members and next of kin actually deserve, as we're describing what justice should look like for them, are all things that you have to be able to consider and put on the table when you're really pursuing, like you said, that true justice. And so that's something that I always sort of remain conscious of. Sometimes we don't necessarily always agree with, the outcomes in cases. We don't agree with rulings that judges come down with. But one of the things that I stand on is the discretion that we have as prosecutors to really effectuate that type of change that we believe should exist in our justice system that have not for so long. So I pride myself in that, as a strong Black woman who's a mother of a young boy and a young girl. I have to make sure that I'm setting that example. And so I can't, again, be a true advocate and someone who understands what justice really should look like for everyone that's involved in our system if I don't keep that at the forefront of the work that I do.
Yeah, I love how personal you made that because I was going to ask you, and we're going to close in just a few seconds here, but Madam Judy, how tough, I guess I would wonder it has been for you is a Black woman who is often overlooked in so many parts of society. How tough it has probably been for you, even in this system yourself. You went, you got your law degree. You're the chief of staff, right? An assistant state's attorney.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very high
Yeah.
position. But I'm sure that it's not always been easy for you to navigate through the system in which you work for and try to bring justice to. And so
Yeah.
I applaud you and what we see you and I just want to ask. I don't know if you could talk about even how hard maybe that walk has been for you to get to the position you're in, and even places where you've had to fight to prove that you're worthy of the position that you have.
Yeah, that's so on point. And one of the things that I oftentimes like to share, just in terms of One of the ideologies that I have around women who have been able to navigate into certain positions is like we have this idea that, we have broken the glass ceiling, so to speak. But I believe that several of those fragments still remain in the workplace, in our justice system. We as women have definitely shown that we have the ability to compete, and the ability to navigate to the top, But unfortunately, particularly as Black women, we are still seen as um, ineligible, um, sometimes as incompetent, weak, incapable. And so those are some of the challenges that we still continue to struggle with, even with the level of discernment that we do have. It's oftentimes questioned. It's questioned because of just who we are as a woman. But then on top of that, adding that element of being a Black woman, unfortunately, we are minimized, and it is tough. It is tough. But I do think that being in a position to show strength and understanding in what God has called you to do, but then also to be an example for that change that oftentimes people tend to model around is the triumph for me. Because on the one hand, people may call you out and question your ability and your skill set to be able to make sound decisions, but the beauty and the glory in it all is that you took a step out on faith to make this decision that, again, was not necessarily a popular decision, and one that, but then again, having people that can applaud you and then subsequently model their policies and practices after the work and the decisions that you have made,
Mm,
that is when you
yeah.
know that you have made the right decision. That is when you know that you truly are a champion for change, a champion for justice, and that you're on the right path, because it's reflected in the work, but it's reflected in the people that have come behind you to adopt the same practices, decisions that you have made in the work that they're also doing. So, you just kind of have to take it in stride. I know for me personally, when I do, again, come against some of those challenges, I have to be in a position to set myself apart. That's one of the ways in which I lead, by being that example, by showing that I am more than capable, beyond what most people can think or imagine. And then I think at that point, people realize, okay, you know what? She's more than qualified than what we thought. But those challenges come day and night, and it's a very difficult place to be in. But you have to continue to know that this is what you have been called to do, and at the end of the day, it's going to be what you're going to do, and it's going to be where I'm going to be.
Yeah, yeah. Listen, I'm so grateful for you all being on. Brother, Reverend Mama Dent, she says, I celebrate you, Assistant State's Attorney Judy. Um, Reverend Kim Carr, Minister Kim Carr says, love Madam Judy, beautiful inside and out.
Oh, thank
And
you
I
so
know that
much.
yes, man. You got a lot of people who love you and you. Pastor, you were not left out. I got a text earlier who said somebody texted me and they said Pastor is too good.
Yes, he
So they were
is,
feeling
Pastor
everything that you were
Pete.
saying, Pastor. Pastor Peter, they're supporting the both of y'all. Love both of you all. Sean Michael Wilson. I don't know if we're supposed to act like we don't know him right now, but he puts in the question. He says, Judy, do you plan to run for state's attorney one day? What is your next step?
Only Sean Michael Wilson would ask such a question. And no, I am supporting Madam State's Attorney Aisha Brave Boy, who is currently seeking re-election in her current position, and I am very loyal to her. But I appreciate, he's always been on me about future opportunities. But right now, I'm focused on where we are and where we will be in the next 4 years.
Yeah. Pastor Harrison says, to you, Pastor Peter. He says, Pastor was dropping knowledge on us. So it gets another shout out for you, Pastor. He also quoted what Judy said: "Take it in stride, set yourself apart, be that example. I'm going to be who I'm going to be, and doing what I'm going to do." Love that right there. I'm going to end with two things. We're going to let Big Homie take us out. But Matt, how you feeling tonight, man? This is your department. This is the social justice department of the Well. I just got to check in with our squad member Matt. What are you feeling, brother? Can you just give us a quick thought on what you felt about tonight's encounter?
I thought it was great. I think it's always really important, right, to talk about how our belief in Jesus, how our following Jesus shows up in different people in different ways, right? Like I think, I have certain convictions about our system that I think are God given, but that doesn't mean that everyone's going to share those necessarily. And I think we all come together as a body of Christ to say let's work together on this, and let's make sure that our people are safe, our families are safe, that injustice is diminished as much as possible, and that justice is done. And I think each of us comes from a slightly different angle of that. And I think it's really awesome that we get to have these conversations together and kind of just see the different sides of Jesus, right? Like he wasn't monolithic. He had a lot of things to say to a lot of different people,
Mhm.
and I really appreciated hearing Jesus through Judy, through Pastor Pete, through Big Homie. I think it was really really cool to hear like the voice of Jesus speaking through everyone's work and through what we're all doing. So yeah, really appreciate you all. This was wonderful.
Yeah, and so what I hope that everyone heard tonight, we're going to close this one. Just make sure that you are, if you're watching us on the rewatch of this, please don't hesitate to DM us, to ask us questions. There are all sorts of ways that we can stay in touch with the folks who have been on. Madam Judy is part of Our Streets, Our Future initiative, where she's leading that, and I'm sure they will have plenty of dates. We will try to share those dates as much as possible. I will share. Madam Judy is so humble in the job that she has. She never hesitates to smile or say hello. So if you're out there and you see her in those events that we're at together, please don't hesitate to do that. I don't think she has any problem with just saying hello or speaking to people. She never has, and she's never been that type of person. I love the fact that you talk about your struggle. I love the fact that you are the example to so many women, and in particular women of color, who are fighting to be seen and to be heard and to be reverenced and to be respected.
Yeah.
And so that is not just an example of Jesus on the peaceful, blue-eyed Jesus, but we're talking about the Jesus and the God that is represented in our women who are fighting effortlessly to be heard and to be respected and to still shine and to be seen as a God-fearing person who embellishes God within their existence. And so, we've seen the many things that are happening, but thank you for being that queen that you are, Madam Judy. And to our King, Prince Peter, to our King, Pastor Peter, who has been on with us, who has shown us that you are a person who fights on the front lines for so many of us, regardless of color, regardless of sexuality. And we need to know that there are people like you who are still in the community who choose to do this day in and day out, who I know it affects your marriage because you've got to take time to do this work. When I'm sure you love to be at home, kick back with your feet up, sipping on some wine, which I hope that you do have those nights, but you are so committed to this work. And you and your husband are to be applauded and saluted, because thank you for showing us that there's a God in you and that God is fighting within you. And so we appreciate you. And for all of those who have joined us, thank you so much for being a part of our encounter. You can follow us on all our social media at Encounter the Well on both Facebook and Instagram. You can check in with us on our website, www.encounterthewell.org. It takes money to keep us moving. So if you like to donate, if you like to contribute, if you like to invest in what we're doing, please don't hesitate to text us at 84321, the number 84321, just like it is there in the picture. Any dollar amount, $100, $50, $5, whatever God lays in your heart to partner with us on, please don't hesitate to do that. And then you can also give again at the website that you see below me there, at www.encounterthewell.org. And at the last The last part of that, you'll see a give tab, and you can learn more about us there. I'm going to yield and thank Amplify Network, the amazing Jackie Sams, Terrence Sam, for hosting us and producing us. We love you so much. Madam Judy, please give regards to Madam Aisha Braveboy. We are wishing her well in her campaign run that she's on right now. Madam Judy, are there any dates that you have just off the top of your mind that you'd like to share with people to look out for?
So as you mentioned, the Our Streets, Our Future initiative is one of the things that we will continue to be in the community engaging on throughout the summer. We will have another engagement date coming up. That one is still kind of fluid in terms of exactly when that date is going to be, but I will be sure to send that information to you so that you can share that with your audienceship. But you could be on the lookout for that.
Thank you. And then Pastor Peter, are there ways in which people can follow you, stay in touch with your ministry and what you're doing?
Of course, you can find us on Facebook at the Community Church of New York City. And you can go to www.communitychurchnyc.org. It's our website. And on our Facebook page, you will find our Twitter account, our IG account, and all those other accounts that my husband had put up there for y'all to stay connected.
I love it, man. Listen, thank you and congratulations on launching the ministry on last weekend, man. Looking forward to coming up to New York and visiting you all. Big homie, I would love for you to go ahead and bless us with one more and take us out, my brother.
Sure. Again, thanks to the Well for the invitation, for being the poet in residence for the month of June. Blessings to everybody who's been on this panel tonight. So I'm going to close with this particular poem called My Why. So everybody, as you raise hell, as you make a difference, and you never know where your seed may be. So realizing, Madam Judy, as far as in the state's attorney's office, as far as with Pastor Peter, and with that young man when he talks about with the pieces, to where I realized that I'm going to read this from my forthcoming book, Please Place an Order for Diaspora Cafe. It's going to officially come out in August, so I'm going to read the particular poem from the book. There was the thing of somebody approached me last fall. It's like, you look familiar. I get that a lot. So it's just like, she was like, she couldn't necessarily recall the school, but she remembered me as an educator. And then the thing was, the last time I worked in that school, there was a 19 in the year. So, like, you never know the impact as far as, like, with that. She was a security guard approaching me in the Royal Farm. So, like I said, you never know the particular impact, whether they remember your name, but, like, what God has for you assigned to do that you make a difference. So I'm going to close out with this poem, My Why. As it's been half of the first week of school and court, I realized my why. Christmas Day 2018 on the Metro, I was assaulted. Most people couldn't care any less that I was insulted, but instead of elementary, the boy was 19. I can't say what were the missteps, if any, in his upbringing, but here's the part that I can play. Oftentimes, many will mistake strength for weakness. My meekness shows caring at all times. The divine will give me the unction to strive to be the conjunction wherever there's a disconnect. My effect I may never know, but the rare glow I get when I know I affected a young person positively. Kids encountered me from the time they were the height of my knee and came back to me in a Walmart 15 years later saying, Mr. Banks. They just wanted to thank me for the brief time I was their educator. And the reward of someone remembering me means we were both the greater for it. My why. For young men, black and brown, adolescent boys don't realize how much society frowns on males their hue, not knowing what to do. The things they do for attention are sometimes unmentionable. The placement in special ed is sometimes justified, but in any placement one can learn. The desire to live your best life has to burn, so in hopes of not going back and forth as in the song, building the resilience to achieve that will be lifelong, and that is my why. I am that guy who was in special ed back in pre-K. I didn't have it made, but I became the magnificent as my mama prayed, and to this day she advocates, fought for me to get the best, to ignite my greatness. My special needs went to exceeding teachers' expectations. I'm a talented and gifted creation. My mother advocated for my mind to be stimulated. Many young people my hue don't see a man in the classroom. No struggle, no progress. So as they know struggle, they will know progress. I'll be their Frederick Douglass, abolishing excuses and speaking to their greatness. So they know someone believes they can achieve and someone cares. Even years later, I'm thankful that they're aware when I see students who are now parents fighting the good fight, remembering me as I guard their building as they sleep at night. My, why? For former students who are now service providers, whether retwisting my locks or in my Lyft ride, they're striving for higher. It's always clear that Mr. Banks is here for them and is their cheerleader no matter what. I want them to win. My reason why is that they have it within, and to win doesn't have to be at another's expense. I don't want any young person to catch an offense. This life has taught me never to give up. And on any young person, I'll never give up. My struggles yield progress. I'll help them through struggles so they'll get to progress. The spit that was put on me, the good book said, made a blind man see. So my why, I know for any young person to learn that I am that guy. Cool.
Thank you so much, Big Homie. And thank you to everybody for being on tonight. Super producer Jackie, thank you again. We love you. And listen, we'll be back in July. We won't be on the first week. By the time that I see you guys again, hopefully I will be the mayor of the city. Until then, though, we love you all, and there's nothing you can do about it. Good night.